Hey guys, if you are here, you are probably looking for two things: a little bit of history and a whole lot of sleep. So, lie back, get comfortable, dim the lights, fluff your pillow like it owes you rent, and let me take you somewhere ancient, sun-baked, brilliant, and profoundly impractical. Tonight, we travel to ancient Greece, the birthplace of democracy, philosophy, and that one person in your group project who will not stop quoting Plato, a land of thinkers, warriors, gods, and extremely bad hygiene. Certainly, they gave us theatre, logic, and architecture, but they also gave us public nudity, communal olive oil scraping, and a breakfast that tastes like burnt gravel behind every marble column, a sunburn behind every great thinker, and probably intestinal parasites. So, close your eyes, prepare to feel deeply, historically grateful for modern plumbing, but before you fully surrender to dreams of goat-filled courtyards and barefoot debates in the agora, leave me a comment. Tell me what time it is, where you are right now, and why exactly you are listening to a video that promises to put you to sleep in just a few minutes. Insomnia is no joke, but I sincerely hope you are not secretly starting underground fight clubs in your spare time without realizing it. Now, let us begin a day in the sandals of an ancient Greek. Morning misery. Your day begins before the sun fully rises over the Aegean. The roosters have not even started their morning announcement, but you are already awake. Your back aching from a night spent on what passes for a bed in this era, a wooden frame with woven rope strips stretched across it, topped with a thin, lumpy mattress, stuffed with straw or wool if you are fortunate. The wealthy might have mattresses filled with feathers, but you are not among them. Your home is constructed of sun-dried mud bricks, held together with clay mortar, pragmatic, inexpensive, and entirely miserable in both summer and winter. In the cool, early morning hours, the walls still hold the previous day's stored heat, creating a stifling environment before the day has even properly begun. There is no glass on your windows, just wooden shutters that you leave open at night in a desperate attempt to catch any passing breeze. You share this modest space with your entire family, parents, siblings, possibly grandparents, and even a few animals seeking shelter. Privacy is a concept that would not be invented for another 2 millennia. Your bedroom might be separated from the main living area by a simple curtain if you are lucky. More likely, you sleep in the main room alongside everyone else. Your sleeping space is demarcated by nothing more than unspoken agreement. As the sun climbs higher, your clay oven of a house begins its daily transformation into something approaching a kiln. The mud brick walls, so effective at retaining heat, now work against you, slowly radiating the accumulated warmth inward until midday. When your home becomes nearly uninhabitable, you will spend most of your day outside, not by choice, but by necessity. In winter, the situation reverses, but remains equally unpleasant without central heating, insulation, or even a proper chimney. The cold seeps through every crack and crevice. Your hearth, a simple fire pit in the center of your main room, provides meager warmth, but fills the house with smoke that stings your eyes and lungs. The smoke eventually finds its way out through a hole in the roof, the same hole that lets in rain and snow during inclement weather. You are wrapped in your himation, the heavy woolen cloak that serves as both outerwear and extra blanket during colder months. You have slept in your clothes, because having night clothes is a luxury beyond imagination. Your fingers are numb, your breath visible in the pre-dawn air inside your own home. The goat that sometimes sleeps in your kitchen has the right idea. It is huddled in the corner, conserving body heat. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth, perhaps covered with rush mats if your family can afford such extravagances in more affluent homes. Floors might be decorated with pebble mosaics, but your modest dwelling features only the occasional smoothed stone set into the dirt. Every step raises a small cloud of dust. Housekeeping in ancient Greece is a losing battle against the elements. You stretch, your joints popping in protest. At 25, you are already developing the stooped posture and chronic aches of someone much older. Life expectancy hovers around 30 to 35 years, and your body is already showing the wear and tear of daily survival. Your teeth ache constantly, worn down by the grit in your daily bread, and the constant gnawing on hard olives and nuts. Before you leave your sleeping mat, you say a quick prayer to Hypnos, thanking him for the gift of sleep. However uncomfortable, you also mutter a plea to Apollo to keep illness from your door for another day. Prayer is not optional in ancient Greece. It is woven into the fabric of every moment. A constant acknowledgement that your existence hangs in the balance of divine whims. Breakfast, or something like it, with the household stirring. It is time for the first meal of the day. Do not get excited. Breakfast in ancient Greece is a spectacularly disappointing affair. The centerpiece of your morning nutrition is a dense flat cake called maza, made from barley flour, mixed with water, and formed into a dried disc. It has been baked near yesterday's dying embers, which means it is neither fresh nor particularly warm. The texture falls somewhere between hardtack and a brick. You dunk the maza into watered-down wine, not for flavor, but for survival. Drinking plain water is a risky proposition in ancient Greece, and wells and natural springs might be contaminated with any number of invisible threats. The concept of water purification is millennia away. Diluted wine, with its alcohol content, offers some protection against waterborne pathogens. Even children drink this watered wine, called puska, starting from a young age. If you are fortunate enough to be in a coastal community, your breakfast might include some dried fish, small, salt-preserved specimens that bear little resemblance to the fresh catch. They are intensely salty, tough, and require vigorous chewing. The persistent fishy taste will linger in your mouth throughout the morning, combining unpleasantly with the sour aftertaste of your wine-water mixture. Fresh fruits are seasonal and often reserved for those who can afford them or those who grow them. Figs might make an appearance when in season, as might pomegranates or apples. Honey exists, but is precious. Beekeeping is practiced, but honey is often reserved for special occasions or medicinal purposes. If you know a beekeeper and have something to trade, you might occasionally sweeten your dismal breakfast with a drizzle of this liquid gold. Dairy products are scarce for most Greeks. Cows are rare and primarily used as working animals rather than for milk production. Goat and sheep milk are more common, transformed into simple yogurt or cheese to extend their usable life in the warm Mediterranean climate. But these are often reserved for later meals or for the privileged. The family does not gather around a table. Such furniture is uncommon. Men might eat sitting on simple stools, while women often eat after the men have finished, sometimes standing or sitting on the floor. Children wait their turn. The hierarchy of the household clearly established through this daily ritual. Plates are basic clay affairs, easily broken and rarely decorated unless you are among the upper classes. You eat with your hands. Forks will not be invented for centuries, though you might have a simple knife and spoon for more liquid foods. There is no pleasant breakfast conversation, no lingering over the meal. This is fuel, not fellowship. You eat quickly, knowing that the day's work does not wait for your digestive comfort. The entire affair takes perhaps 15 minutes before you are expected to begin your daily labors. As you choke down the last of your maza, you mentally prepare for a day that will require immense physical exertion on this meager caloric foundation. Your stomach still feels hollow, but this sensation of mild hunger is your constant companion. True satiation is rare in ancient Greece, where famine is always just one bad harvest away. Hygiene. Greek edition. Before you head out to face the day, you must attend to personal hygiene, though your conception of clean would horrify modern sensibilities. There is no bathroom as you know it, no running water, no gleaming porcelain fixtures. Instead, you have a designated corner of the house with a chamber pot for nighttime needs, which someone, usually a woman or enslaved person, I will empty into the street gutter or a cesspit outside town. Morning ablutions are minimalist at best. You splash your face with water from a pitcher, poured into a shallow basin. Soap does not exist in its modern form. Instead, you might use olive oil to cleanse your skin, applying it liberally before scraping it off with a curved metal tool called a strigil. This scraping removes not only the oil, but also dead skin, dirt, and sweat. The process leaves your skin reasonably clean, but perpetually shiny and faintly olive-scented. This oil cleansing method doubles as your deodorant strategy, though its effectiveness is questionable. The Mediterranean climate means you will be sweating again within hours, and the concept of masking body odor simply does not exist. Everyone smells like some combination of sweat, olive oil, wood smoke, and whatever their occupation adds to the olfactory mix. Fortunately, your nose becomes desensitized to the prevailing human scent of your era. Your teeth receive cursory attention, perhaps a rub with a rag, or if you are particularly conscientious, a chew on a twig from an aromatic tree like mastic. Some Greeks use a powder made from charred animal bones or crushed shells mixed with dried herbs. Rubbed across the teeth with a finger, the result is breath that is marginally less offensive, and teeth that continue their steady deterioration. Dental pain is considered a normal part of existence, and tooth loss begins for many by their 20s. For more thorough cleansing, public baths exist in larger towns and cities, though they are nothing like the elaborate Roman facilities that will develop later. These are simple affairs. Communal washing spaces, where privacy is non-existent. Men and women bathe separately, but within each group, all ages and social classes might mingle naked in the same facility. Water is heated in large cauldrons, a luxury for which you might pay a small fee. Your hair receives attention every few days, washed with water, and perhaps treated with olive oil for conditioning. Lice are a constant concern, and family members regularly check each other's hair for the parasites, manually removing them. Both men and women wear their hair longer than modern standards. Though men's styles are typically shorter than women's, women often wear elaborate braids or updos, while men might wear their hair in simpler styles. Beards are common for men, trimmed but rarely completely shaved for women, and the grooming routine might include the application of white lead to lighten the skin, a beauty practice that slowly poisons its practitioners. Cheeks might be pinched for color, lips stained with berry juice. Perfume exists for the wealthy, made from pressed flowers and plant oils, but most people's scent profile consists primarily of their occupation and the ever-present olive oil. Menstruation brings additional hygiene challenges for women, addressed with primitive cloth pads that must be washed and reused. The associated taboos mean this natural function is handled discreetly, often with practical systems developed and passed down among women, with little public acknowledgement. Before leaving home, You don a fresh chiton, if you own more than one. If not, yesterday's garment continues its service. Your feet might remain bare, especially in warmer months, or be protected by simple leather sandals that offer minimal cushioning against the rocky Greek terrain. Either way, your feet are permanently calloused, dirt-stained, and likely bearing numerous small injuries from daily navigation of unpaved surfaces. Fashion fails. Your ancient Greek wardrobe makes minimalism look excessive. The foundation of your clothing collection consists of perhaps 2 or 3 chitons, large rectangles of linen or wool fabric that you drape and pin around your body. There is no sewing involved, no careful tailoring to your proportions. The same basic template clothes everyone from farmers to philosophers, with wealth displayed through the quality of the fabric rather than the cut or style. For men, the chiton typically reaches the knees and is often worn with a belt or cord around the waist. Women's chitons are full length, reaching the ankles for modesty. The garment is fastened at the shoulders with pins or buttons made of bone, wood, or, if you are prosperous, bronze or silver. These pins are crucial. Lose one, and half your outfit is at risk of collapsing around your ankles at any moment. Over the chiton, when weather or social occasions demand, you wear a himation, another large rectangle, this one worn as a cloak or wrap. Draping this unwieldy swath of fabric requires practice and frequent adjustment throughout the day. There is a social art to wearing it properly. And the way you arrange your himation broadcasts your social status and your respect for public decorum. Enslaved people and manual laborers often wear only the chiton, the himation being impractical for physical work. Underneath these outer layers, nothing. Undergarments as we know them do not exist. Women might bind their breasts with a band of cloth called an apodesmos or strophion, but nothing resembling underwear protects your dignity. This absence makes windy days particularly hazardous for modesty, and sitting on cold stone is an experience in direct temperature transfer. The color palette of your wardrobe is limited by available natural dyes. Most everyday clothing is the natural color of the fiber off, white for linen, beige, or brown for wool. Wealthier individuals might afford garments dyed with plant extracts, yielding muted yellows, reds, blues, or greens. The vibrant purple derived from thousands of crushed murex shellfish is so prohibitively expensive that it is reserved for royalty and the extremely wealthy. Your clothing is never truly clean by modern standards. Washing involves beating garments on rocks at the river or public fountain, using lye made from wood ash, which gradually damages the fibers. The result is clothes that carry a permanent grey cast and retain traces of every stain they have encountered. You own so few garments that each must serve through all conditions until it literally falls apart, at which point it might be repurposed as patches, children's clothing, or cleaning rags. Footwear is similarly basic. Leather sandals, with minimal shaping, constitute formal footwear. Secured with thin strips wrapped around the ankle, these offer protection from the hottest surfaces, but little cushioning or support. The wealthy might have sandals with thicker soles or decorative elements, while enslaved people and the poorest citizens often go barefoot, their soles developing calluses thick enough to withstand all but the sharpest stones. Formal accessories are few but meaningful. Women wear veils when outside the house, signaling their modesty and respectability. Jewelry exists, but is typically limited to simple rings, earrings, and bracelets for most citizens. Elaborate gold pieces with intricate designs are reserved for the elite or for special occasions, such as weddings. Many jewelry items double as protective amulets, inscribed with prayers or symbols to ward off evil. The exposed nature of Greek clothing makes you vulnerable to the elements, with no specialized garments for different weather conditions. You simply layer your limited pieces in winter, or remove layers in summer. There are no waterproof options for rainy days. You simply get wet and hope to dry out later. Sunday protection is non-existent. Your face and arms develop a leathery tan from constant exposure, leading to premature aging and skin damage. Most devastating for the modern time traveler, there are no pockets. Every item you need to carry must be tucked into your belt, held in a small drawstring pouch, or carried openly in your hands. Your coins, house, key, if you have locks, eating knife, and personal amulets, must all find space in this limited carrying system. Important documents are awkwardly rolled and tucked into your belt, creating ungainly bulges in your silhouette. Hats are uncommon, except for travelers, who might wear a broad-brimmed petassos for sun protection on journeys without headwear. Your scalp burns in summer, and your ears freeze in winter. Women's elaborate hairstyles offer some protection, but men's shorter cuts leave them vulnerable to the elements. The concept of sunscreen will not exist for another 2.5 millennia, so your skin bears the full brunt of the Mediterranean sun's intensity. War is not a career, it is your life. In ancient Greece, especially in states like Athens and Sparta, military service is not something you choose. It is fundamental to your identity as a citizen. If you are a free male, your status as a warrior begins early and never truly ends until old age renders you physically incapable. For Athenian boys, military training begins formally at age 18, with 2 years of mandatory service in the Ephabia, a combination of military training and civic education. Before this formal induction, you have spent years hearing war stories from your father and relatives, perhaps practicing with wooden swords in the street with other boys. You have attended religious festivals where martial prowess is celebrated and watched older males compete in athletic contests that serve as thinly disguised military training. Spartan military indoctrination is famously more intense and begins much earlier. At age 7, you are taken from your mother's home to live in the Agoge, the state education and training program. Here you learn not just fighting techniques, but how to endure hardship as a way of life. Your daily routine includes insufficient food, encouraging you to steal to supplement your diet, but punishing you severely if caught. This teaches stealth and cunning. You wear minimal clothing even in winter, endure regular beatings, both as punishment and as tests of endurance, and engage in constant competition with your peers. The Spartan system deliberately breaks family bonds and replaces them with loyalty to the state and your military unit. You sleep on a mat of reeds. You have gathered yourself from the riverbanks, with no blanket to soften either the surface or the cold. Your head is shaved, your feet always bare regardless of season. The older boys administer discipline to the younger, creating a self-perpetuating cycle of hardship. By 15, you have likely been flogged publicly at the altar of Artemis Orthia, a ritual test of endurance, where boys are sometimes whipped to death, while they must maintain stoic silence. Once you reach military age, your life revolves around the possibility, even probability, of combat. Greece is not a unified nation, but a collection of often warring city-states, border disputes, competition for resources, and simple power dynamics mean that warfare is a constant feature of Greek life. The Peloponnesian War between Athens and Sparta lasted 27 years, nearly an entire generation, even during nominal peacetime. Raids, skirmishes, and small-scale conflicts continue, When called to war, you must provide your own equipment, a crushing economic burden for many citizens. A full set of hoplite armor, the hoplon shield, bronze breastplate, greaves for shin protection, helmet, spear, and sword cost roughly the equivalent of 3 years' wages for an average worker. Many citizens can only afford partial armor, entering battle dangerously underprotected. Some families pass down armor through generations, meaning you might fight wearing an ill-fitting helmet that belonged to your grandfather. The phalanx formation, the core of Greek warfare, transforms individual soldiers into a collective fighting machine. You stand shoulder to shoulder with your fellow citizens, shields overlapping, spears extended forward in multiple rows. The physical and psychological pressure is immense. You cannot retreat without endangering everyone around you. Personal courage becomes less relevant than collective discipline. Combat itself is brutally intimate. There is no long-range artillery barrage, no impersonal death from a distance. You see the eyes of the person trying to kill you. You feel the impact through your shield when formations clash. The soundscape is a nightmare of metal, striking metal, screams of the wounded, and the grunting exertion of men trying simultaneously to kill and to stay alive. The smell of blood, excrement, as bowels release in death, sweat, and dust, creates a miasma that haunts veterans' memories. Wounds in this era are catastrophic. Medical knowledge is primitive. Antibiotics are non-existent. A significant limb injury likely means amputation without anesthesia. Abdominal wounds are nearly always fatal due to infection. Head injuries that do not kill immediately often result in lifetime impairment. Even survivors carry permanent scars, chronic pain, and what we would now recognize as post-traumatic stress disorder, though no such diagnosis or treatment exists. If you survive the battle, but are captured, your fate depends entirely on the victor's whims. You might be ransomed if your family can afford it, enslaved if they cannot, or simply executed on the spot. There are no Geneva Conventions, no protected status for prisoners of war. The strongest bond in battle is with the person standing beside you. Your survival depends on each other, creating brotherhood more powerful than many family ties. Returning home from war brings no ticker-tape parades, no veterans benefits, no support for readjustment to civilian life. If you are physically disabled by your service, you must rely on family for support or face destitution. The psychological impacts go completely untreated, except through religious rituals that may or may not provide comfort. Some veterans find they can no longer relate to civilians who have not shared their experiences, creating a timeless alienation, familiar to warriors throughout history. For all its brutality, military service is paradoxically the foundation of your citizenship rights. Only those who risk their lives in defense of the state have full participation in its governance. Your military unit often becomes your voting bloc in the assembly, your social circle in peacetime, and the core of your identity throughout life. The person who refuses military service or shows cowardice faces not just legal penalties, but social death, a complete loss of status and respect that extends to their entire family. Death in battle is publicly honored. The ultimate sacrifice for the polis merits public burial speeches, praising your valor and guaranteed care for your dependents. This glorification of the beautiful death in service to the state creates powerful social pressure to embrace a warrior ethos. Regardless of your personal inclinations, mothers in Sparta famously tell their sons to come back, carrying their shields, or being carried upon them. Victory or death are the only acceptable outcomes. Being a woman in ancient Greece, while men engage in politics and warfare, the life of an ancient Greek woman follows an entirely different trajectory. one constrained by rigid gender roles and legal limitations that would be unimaginable in modern society. Your life as a Greek woman is largely confined to the gynaikon, the women's quarters of the house, typically located in the upper level or rear portion of the dwelling. This physical separation is symbolic of your separation from public life, while the men's quarters, the andron, open to the street and welcome visitors. Your domain faces inward, hidden from public view and significantly more cramped. From birth, your value is measurably less than your brother's. When you are born, your father has the legal right to decide whether to keep you or expose you, abandoning unwanted infants outside the city, where they would likely die unless taken in by another family or collected by slave traders. Female infants face exposure more frequently than males, considered economic burdens rather than assets. If your family decides to raise you, it is with the understanding that they will eventually need to provide a dowry for your marriage. Your education, if you receive any formal instruction at all, focuses exclusively on domestic skills, while your brothers might learn reading, writing, mathematics, and philosophy. You learn weaving, cooking, household management, and basic principles of childcare. Literacy among women varies dramatically by region and class. Spartan women typically receive more education than their Athenian counterparts. But even this education emphasizes physical fitness for breeding strong children rather than intellectual development. Your daily routine revolves around household labor. You rise early to manage breakfast preparation, then spend hours at the loom. Weaving is the quintessential female occupation, producing the textiles needed for all family clothing. The work is tedious, hard on the eyes and back, yet essential to the household economy. A woman's weaving skill directly affects her family's comfort and their public presentation. Water collection occupies another significant portion of your day, since homes lack running water. Daily trips to the public fountain are necessary. This rare opportunity to leave the house comes with strict behavioral codes. You must appear modest, avoid conversation with men, and return promptly. The heavy water jugs cause chronic back and shoulder problems over time. But this pain is simply an expected part of womanhood. Food preparation is particularly labor-intensive. Grinding grain into flour for daily bread requires hours of manual effort with a stone quern. The repetitive motion, eventually deforming your hands. Cooking occurs over an open hearth fire that must be carefully maintained throughout the day, filling the house with smoke and presenting constant burn hazards. Every meal represents hours of preparation with tools that are primitive by modern standards. Your legal status is essentially that of a permanent minor. You cannot own property independently, enter into contracts, or participate in any form of government. In court cases, you cannot testify on your own behalf. A male guardian must represent your interests, if he chooses to do so. Throughout your life, you remain under the legal control of a kurios, a male guardian, first your father, then your husband, and if widowed, your son or nearest male relative. Marriage occurs early, usually between 14 and 18 years old, and rarely involves your input or consent. The arrangement is negotiated between your father and your future husband, who is likely significantly older, perhaps in his 30s. The age gap ensures your malleability and subordination within the marriage. The legal transaction centers around your dowry, the property and money your family provides to support your maintenance in your husband's household. This dowry technically remains yours, but is controlled by your husband throughout the marriage. Your primary function in marriage is reproduction, specifically producing legitimate male heirs. Pregnancy and childbirth are perilous, with maternal mortality rates estimated between 10 to 20% per birth. Without effective birth control or obstetrical care, you might experience 10 or more pregnancies during your reproductive years, each carrying significant risk. Childbirth takes place at home, with only female attendants, perhaps a midwife if available. Complications that would be routine in modern medicine often prove fatal. Fidelity standards apply unequally between husband and wife. Your chastity is guarded. Ferociously adultery by a wife is among the most serious social offenses, potentially resulting in divorce, complete loss of status, or even violence. Meanwhile, your husband is free to seek sexual satisfaction with concubines, prostitutes, or even enslaved people, facing social censure only if his indulgences become financially ruinous. Your social circle is severely limited, consisting primarily of female relatives and neighbors. Respectable women do not attend symposia, drinking parties, theatrical performances, or most religious festivals where men are present. Your rare public appearances occur during specific women's religious festivals, funerals of family members, or as a carefully chaperoned bride. Within this constrained social world, women develop their own networks, rituals, and support systems largely invisible to the male-dominated historical record. Widowhood presents particular challenges. If you have adult sons, you might live in their household, under their guardianship, without male relatives willing to support you. Though your options are bleak, perhaps remarriage if you are still young enough to bear children, or a marginal existence, relying on charity. There is no social security, no pension system, no widow's benefits. Your financial security depends entirely on family connections. In Sparta, women's lives differ significantly from the Athenian model. Spartan girls receive physical education alongside basic literacy and numeracy, developing strong bodies through running, wrestling, and throwing the javelin and discus. This training serves the state's interest in producing healthy offspring rather than promoting female autonomy. Spartan women manage large estates while their husbands serve in the military, giving them economic power unknown to their Athenian counterparts. This relative freedom generates criticism from other Greek states, where Spartan women are viewed as scandalously independent. Despite these overwhelming constraints, women find ways to exercise influence. Religious roles offer rare opportunities for public authority. Priestesses of certain cults wield significant power and respect. The domestic sphere, while limited, represents a domain where women exercise meaningful control through the management of household resources, the training of children, and the maintenance of religious rituals. Women shape family life, despite their formal powerlessness. Democracy terms and conditions apply. When you hear ancient Greek democracy, I forget everything you know about modern representative government. Athenian democracy, the most famous example, operated on principles that would shock contemporary democratic sensibilities. First and foremost, participation was radically restricted. Out of Athens' total population of approximately 250,000 to 300,000 people, only about 30,000 held citizenship rights. To qualify, you needed to be a free adult male born to Athenian parents on both sides, women, foreigners, resident aliens, children, and enslaved people, comprising roughly 80 to 90% of the population, had no political voice whatsoever, even among citizens. real political participation, was further divided along class lines, while technically any citizen could attend the assembly, where policies were debated and voted upon. Practical realities limited regular attendance to those living in or near the city and those who could afford to take time away from work. Farmers from outlying villages attended infrequently, generally only for crucial votes, meaning urban citizens exercise disproportionate influence. The assembly itself presents a chaotic picture to modern eyes. Up to 6,000 citizens might gather on the Pnyx, a hillside west of the Acropolis. There are no benches or seats. You stand or sit on the rocky ground throughout proceedings that might last from dawn until dusk. There is no amplification system, so speakers must possess naturally powerful voices to be heard by the entire crowd. The noise level is significant. Cheers, years, and side conversations create a constant din that speakers must overcome. The procedural structure seems haphazard by modern standards. A preliminary agenda is set by the Council of 500, but the Assembly can modify this agenda on the spot. Any citizen can speak, though, in practice, a small group of rhetorically skilled, regular speakers dominate discussion. There is no time limit on speeches, no requirement for factual accuracy, and emotional appeals often prove more persuasive than logical arguments. Votes are taken by simple show of hands, counted approximately by officials. There are no secret ballots, no protection from intimidation, no recounts in close decisions. Perhaps most jarring to modern democratic sensibilities is the absence of constitutional protections for individual rights. The will of the majority, as expressed in assembly votes, is absolute. There is no equivalent to a Bill of Rights, no independent judiciary to check legislative excess. This leads to notorious cases where the assembly makes capricious or unjust decisions in moments of popular passion, such as the trial of the generals after the Battle of Arginusae, where successful commanders were executed for failing to rescue survivors due to a storm. The Athenian legal system further illuminates the gaps between ancient and modern democratic ideals. There are no professional judges or lawyers. Important cases are heard by jury courts, dicasteria, composed of hundreds of citizen volunteers, selected by lottery. These jurors receive no special training in law or evidence evaluation. Litigants must represent themselves, though they might hire speechwriters to prepare their arguments. Trial days begin with jurors swearing an oath to vote according to the laws and evidence, but without legal expertise. Most rely on personal impressions and emotional reactions. Court procedures lack most modern protections for the accused. There is no presumption of innocence, no protection against self-incrimination, no clear standard of proof. Witnesses are not cross-examined systematically, and hearsay evidence is freely admitted. Testimony from enslaved people is only accepted if extracted under torture, based on the belief that they would only tell the truth if physically compelled. Jurors vote immediately after hearing arguments, without deliberation among themselves, by placing a pebble in one of two urns, one for conviction, one for acquittal. The majority determines the outcome, with no appeal process. For administrative positions, Athens employs a distinctive approach selection by lottery rather than election. Most governmental officials are chosen randomly from the citizen body, serving one-year terms with no possibility of immediate re-election. This system reflects a deep suspicion of professionalization in politics and a commitment to the idea that any citizen is capable of governing. In practice, this means that one day you might be selling olives in the agora, and the next day you are responsible for temple finances or supervising the grain supply. The exception to the lottery system is for military leadership and a few specialized roles requiring specific skills. Generals and strategoi are elected annually and can serve multiple consecutive terms, creating an unusual avenue for consistent leadership in an otherwise constantly rotating government. This exception acknowledges the practical reality that military command requires experience and expertise that random selection cannot guarantee. Funding for this democratic system reveals another contradiction. Wealthy citizens bear disproportionate financial responsibility through a system called liturgies. If you are among the 300 to 1,200 richest Athenians, you might be required to pay for the production of a theatrical performance, outfit a warship, or fund an embassy to another city-state. Refusal is not an option, though you can challenge the assignment by claiming another citizen is wealthier and should take your place in antidosis procedure. This creates a situation where the wealthiest citizens fund a system in which they have the same single vote as the poorest citizen. Perhaps the most notorious feature of Athenian democracy is ostracism, an annual vote in which citizens could banish an individual for 10 years without specific charges or trial. Each citizen would scratch a name on a pottery shard, anostrakon, and the person receiving the most votes, provided at least 6,000 votes were cast, would be exiled. Though their property remained intact, and their family could stay in Athens. This institution aimed to prevent potential tyrants from gaining too much power, but was frequently used against unpopular but innocent figures. The philosophical justification for this limited democracy reveals values profoundly different from modern democratic theory. For Athenians, democracy was not primarily about protecting individual rights or ensuring equal representation. Instead, it centered on the concept of citizens actively participating in self-governance as a collective. The goal was not to aggregate individual preferences, but to discover what was best for the polis through deliberation and shared wisdom. This explains why restrictions on who could be a citizen seemed logical rather than contradictory. Only those with a permanent stake in the community's welfare were trusted to make decisions about it. Education for citizenship receives no formal attention. There is no civics, curriculum, no training in the skills needed for effective political participation. Citizens learn by watching, participating, and absorbing cultural values from poetry, drama, and oral tradition. This creates a political culture heavily influenced by shared mythology and historical memory, rather than systematic analysis of policy options. Foreign policy decisions, often literally matters of war and peace, are made in this same assembly setting, sometimes based on a single passionate speech. Ambassadors from other states might address the assembly directly, attempting to sway public opinion through persuasion or promises. Treaties are ratified by simple majority vote, sometimes with minimal debate. This direct decision-making on crucial international matters contrasts dramatically with modern representative systems, where foreign policy typically involves professional diplomats and executive discretion. Despite these limitations and contradictions, Athenian democracy represents a remarkable innovation in governance, the first system to systematically involve ordinary citizens in political decision-making, rather than reserving power for aristocrats or tyrants. The principle that citizens should actively participate in governance, rather than merely being subjects of a ruler, fundamentally reshapes political possibilities. Even if the Athenian implementation falls far short of modern democratic values, the dark side and the light, you have made it through the heat, the hunger, the goat-scented tunic. But here is what the textbooks leave out. Ostracism, ancient, cancel culture, You are popular in Athens, too popular. You gave one too many convincing speeches. People clapped too enthusiastically when you walked into the agora. You maybe smiled a little too confidently at someone's wife. And now you are being banished. No trial. No warning. No heartfelt goodbye. Just a piece of broken pottery with your name on it. An ostracon scratched out by people who have decided you need a 10-year vacation. You are not being punished for a crime. You are being punished for charisma. This is ostracism. And it is very democratic. The people vote. If 6,000 of those pottery shards bear your name, you are out. Your house remains intact. Your property untouched. Your citizenship preserved. But your social life is erased. They do not want you jailed. They just want you gone for 10 years. Because in Athens, too much success looks a lot like tyranny. The ceremony itself is painfully public. Everyone knows what is happening. There is no hiding from it. No spinning it as a strategic withdrawal from public life. You stand in the agora as the count is announced. The whispers ripple through the crowd, the side glances, the quiet satisfaction of your rivals. You have 10 days to pack and say goodbye. 10 days to explain to your children why you will not see them grow up. 10 days to arrange your affairs, knowing you cannot return until a decade has passed. In a world where the average lifespan hovers around 35 years, a decade is practically a lifetime. Famous victims include Aristides, the just so beloved that someone admitted to voting against him just because they were tired of hearing how virtuous he was. Harsh and Themistocles, the war hero who saved Athens from the Persians, got the boot. 2. It turns out democracy remembers your flaws long after it forgets your victories. Simon and Thucydides, not the historian. The politician also made the list. The roll call reads like a who's who of Athenian leadership. No one was safe from the pottery fragments of public opinion. Some exiles flourished elsewhere. Some plotted revenge. Some died before their 10 years elapsed. Nearly all felt the sting of rejection from the very city they had served. The psychology of ostracism was elegant. No blood, nor martyrs, just absence. It was democracy's pressure valve, letting off steam before things exploded. Imagine checking your social media to find you've been voted off not just the platform, but the entire country for a decade, with no appeal, no explanation needed. Ostracism was not about guilt. It was about balance. No one got too loud. No one flew too high. It was democracy, with a backhand. And as you pack your sandals and chiton, preparing for 10 years of exile, you wonder if maybe democracies need mechanisms like this, ways to remind the powerful that popularity is borrowed, never owned. Mortality. You die early and often. Forget growing old. In ancient Greece, just growing up is a win. Life expectancy hovers around 30 to 35 years. And that is, if you are lucky, male, wealthy, and not at war. The numbers tell a grim story, but they do not capture the constant presence of death in daily life. It is not just that you die young, it is that you watch others die young constantly. Your entire psychological landscape is shaped by the fragility of existence. Child mortality is brutal. Roughly 1 in 3 children dies before age 5. Your sibling might vanish in the night from a cough no one understands. Your neighbor's wife might die in childbirth, bleeding out on a straw mat. 1 bad meal, 1 infected cut, 1 unlucky prayer, and it is over. You attend more funerals than birthdays. Children's graves line the roads outside every city. Tiny offerings, clay dolls, miniature chariots mark lives barely begun. The emotional toll is immeasurable. Mothers do not name babies until they have survived a week. Fathers maintain a careful distance until a child reaches an age where survival seems likely not from lack of love, but from the practical psychology of living with constant loss. There are no hospitals, nor antibiotics, no emergency care. That pain in your side could be nothing, or it could be death approaching. That fever, perhaps a mild illness, perhaps your final night alive. You live with uncertainty as your constant companion. Infections fester, wounds swell, diseases spread fast. And once an epidemic hits, it hits hard. The plague of Athens during the Peloponnesian War wiped out a third of the city. Thucydides, the historian, caught it, survived, and wrote about it. Most were not that lucky. He described bodies piled one atop another, and sacred places filled with corpses. The social fabric dissolved as quickly as the physical bodies, laws ignored, customs abandoned, the pursuit of pleasure becoming urgent in the face of inevitable demise. Your options when sick: stay home, bleed, pray, visit a temple, and maybe touch a sacred snake. Rub garlic on your chest and hope. The healers try their best with herbs, incantations, and rudimentary surgery, but their best still leaves most serious conditions untreated. A broken leg might heal crooked, leaving you with a lifelong limp. An infected wound might require amputation performed without anesthesia. You do not know what a virus is. You think your dreams might cause illness. You wonder if the gods are angry. You wonder if it is your fault, or your cousin's, or your great-grandfather's. The grief never fully processes, because it never fully stops. There is always another death, another funeral procession, another tomb to visit. And because death is omnipresent, your attitude toward it is paradoxically matter of fact. You do not have existential crises about mortality. You have practical concerns about proper burial rites. You worry not about whether you will die, but whether your soul will find peace afterward, and you will never know. The gods never relax. They are always watching. You do not believe in the gods. You fear them constantly. And you should. Zeus throws lightning. Poseidon sinks ships. Artemis sends plagues. Athena turns people into spiders for asking the wrong question. The gods are not abstract concepts or distant figures. They are immediate, temperamental forces that shape every moment of your existence. Their presence is as real and tangible as the ground beneath your feet. They do not care about your intentions. They care about ritual precision. You said the prayer wrong, tough luck. You missed a festival crop failure. You used the wrong incense. Enjoy that spontaneous illness. The physical world is just the surface layer of reality. Beneath it lies a complex web of divine whims, ancient grudges, and supernatural influences. A sudden rain shower is not merely weather, it is divine communication. A victory in battle is not just strategy, it is divine favor. A child born with a deformity is not genetics, it is divine punishment. Religion is not once a week, it is every day. You pour wine on the ground, you burn grain in the hearth, you whisper prayers before travel, before sex, before planting, before doing literally anything. Your day is structured around propitiation, the constant effort to keep divine wrath at bay. Dawn prayers to Eos for the day ahead. Midday offerings to Helios as the sun reaches its peak. Evening rituals to Hestia for protection through the night. Every meal begins with a portion for the gods. Every journey starts with a prayer for safe passage. Every major life decision requires divination reading on trails, watching bird flight patterns, interpreting the Delphic oracle's cryptic utterances, You have household gods, city gods, ancestral spirits. You hang amulets, you wear charms, you knock on wood literally, because divine punishment is not poetic, it is personal. And the worst part, the gods are not fair. They play favorites, hold grudges, and punish descendants for ancestors' mistakes. Your great-grandfather offended Apollo. Your family might suffer for generations. A neighboring city built a better temple to Athena. Your city might face her neglect. Mythology is not just stories. It is cautionary tales about what happens to those who forget their place. Niobe boasted about her children and watched Apollo and Artemis slaughter them all. Arachne challenged Athena to a weaving contest and ended up transformed into a spider. Cassandra rejected Apollo's advances and was cursed to speak true prophecies. No one would believe. The gods do not love you, do not guide you. They test you, and if you fail, the sky collapses. But you depend on them anyway. Because what else do you have? Slavery, the structure beneath the marble. Let us get real. Ancient Greece, the land of philosophers, democracy, and white columns is built on slavery, not metaphorically, literally. The scale is staggering. In Athens alone, enslaved people might outnumber free citizens. In Sparta, the Helot population dwarfs the warrior elite by 7-1. This is not a minor economic feature. It is the entire foundation. Slaves farm the fields, row the warships, build the temples, serve the wine, and raise the children of the elite. Even modest households have at least one slave, not because they are rich, but because slavery is normal. The silver mines at Lorient, the source of Athens' wealth and naval power, run on slave labor. Thousands work in darkness, breathing toxic dust, dying by the hundreds. Their bodies are disposed of without ceremony. Their names are never recorded. The famous Athenian navy, pride of the democratic city-state, is powered by slaves chained to the rowing benches. Those magnificent triremes that defeated the Persians at Salamis, propelled forward by the muscles of men who would never share in the glory. There is no abolition movement. No moral debate. Aristotle, yes. That Aristotle says some people are slaves by nature. Charming. Slavery exists across the spectrum. House slaves, agricultural slaves, mining slaves, public slaves. Some work as teachers, accountants, or craftsmen. Some receive a modicum of respect for their skills, but all remain property, subject to the whims of their owners. Slaves come from everywhere: Thrace, Syria, Anatolia, even other Greek cities. They are prisoners of war, kidnapped travelers, or people sold by their own families. The methods of enslavement are diverse and brutal. Pirates raid coastal villages, taking everyone they can catch. Military campaigns end with civilian populations in chains. Debt forces the desperate to sell themselves or their children. They have no rights. They can be beaten, branded, or killed at will. If freed, a rare miracle, they still owe loyalty to their former master, and they can never become full citizens. Slave uprisings are rare, but terrifying to the free population. Sparta's entire social structure revolves around controlling their Hello underclass, the Crypteia, a secret police force of young Spartan warriors, routinely murders helots who seem too confident, too capable, too likely to inspire resistance. In the silver mines of Lorient, slaves, including children, crawl through tight shafts, breathing in poison dust, digging out wealth they will never touch. They the underground nameless, exhausted, forgotten. The philosopher, contemplating ethics in the afternoon sun. His leisure exists because a slave is working his land. The citizen participating in democratic debate, he can spend his day in the agora because slaves run his household. The playwrights creating timeless tragedies about justice and morality, their cultural contributions depend on an economic system built on human ownership. So yes, when you walk past the shining Parthenon, I remember it did not build itself, and it was not built by choice. Medicine, I hope, and garlic. You feel feverish, weak. Something is wrong, but you do not know what. The boundary between health and illness is a mysterious frontier crossed without warning, often without return. So you go see a doctor, which in ancient Greece is a mix of herbalist, philosopher, and enthusiastic gambler. His tools, a bronze knife, a fire-heated cup, and a head full of theories about the four humors: blood, onphlegm, yellow bile, black bile. If you are sick, one of these is out of balance. The treatment: drain blood, induce vomiting, fast for 3 days. Also figs, always figs. The Hippocratic physicians observe carefully. They document symptoms. They are skilled at prognosis, predicting who will live and who will die. But treatment is where things get dicey. Their fundamental understanding of human physiology is completely wrong. They do not know about germs, cells, organs, or systems. They believe the brain's primary function is cooling the blood. They think the heart is the center of thought and emotion. They are working with a map that bears almost no relation to the territory. If you are lucky, the doctor knows how to stitch. If not, he will apply moldy bread to your wound and say a prayer. Some treatments accidentally work. Willow, bark tea for pain, contains natural aspirin. Honey on wounds is actually antibacterial. Moldy bread is a primitive form of penicillin, but these successes occur without understanding why they work. It is medicine, by coincidence. Surgery is without anesthesia. You bite down on a strap and scream into the sky. If you die, it is your humor's fault. If you live, the gods smiled on you. Surgeons become remarkably fast. Speed equals mercy when you are cutting conscious flesh. A bladder stone removal might take under 2 minutes. A skilled surgeon amputates a limb in less than 3. Every second counts when the patient feels everything. Trepanation drilling holes in the skull is performed on the fully conscious. Some patients survive. Some even improve if they had blood clots that the procedure relieved. Most are left with permanent damage or die from infection. Midwives handle childbirth. They use herbs, chants, pressure, hot stones, and cold cloths, but no one can stop what is coming. If the baby's a breech, there is no cesarean section. There is no epidural. There is only pain, luck, and mortality. Women's medicine is its own specialized field. Shrouded in mystery and misconception, female anatomy is poorly understood, with bizarre theories about wandering wombs that can move around the body, causing symptoms from foot pain to hysteria. Mental illness receives treatments ranging from compassionate to horrific. Some physicians recognize the therapeutic value of music, conversation, and gentle exercise. Others recommend restraints, isolation, and purgatives so severe they border on torture. Still, they try. They learn. They observe. They believe in fresh air, rest, and diet. They believe illness is natural and spiritual, and in that they are not entirely wrong. The Hippocratic Oath, still referenced in medical ethics today, begins by swearing to Apollo. It is a bridge between scientific observation and religious reverence, between empirical treatment and spiritual healing. In a world where death is always near, you take help wherever you can find it. Theater, brutal, brilliant, and loud, you have survived the sun, the labor, the goat chase. You are exhausted. Time to relax. Right, wrong, time for the theater. It is not entertainment. It is a civic duty. You walk sometimes miles to a massive open-air arena carved into the hillside. The Theatre of Dionysus in Athens holds 17,000 spectators. That is not a venue. That is a small city gathered in one space, all watching the same performance, all reacting as one organism. Thousands of citizens pack in shoulder to shoulder. There is no shade. You sit on stone steps for 10 hours. There is no bathroom. You find a bush. There is no snack bar. You chew on a fig and weep. This is not casual entertainment. It is religious festival, cultural indoctrination, political commentary, all wrapped in masks, music, and movement. The play's tragedies. Everyone dies, usually because of a prophecy, a misunderstanding, or divine spite. Oedipus blinds himself after discovering he has married his mother. Medea murders her own children to punish her unfaithful husband. The house of Atreus descends through generations of cannibalism, incest, and murder. Light stuff, perfect for a sunny afternoon. Comedies, giant costumes, dirty jokes, a political satire, and full frontal nudity. Aristophanes' actors wear enormous phalluses strapped to their costumes. Politicians get mocked by name. No one is spared. Not generals, not philosophers, not even the gods. Laughter becomes a weapon, skewering the powerful and the pretentious. Satirpleis, drunk gods with goat legs, yelling about wine and lust. Half man, half goat, creatures with permanent erections, chase nymphs across the stage. Dionysus, god of wine and theatre, presides over organized chaos. Sacred and profane blur together in ritual revelry. Actors wear huge masks and platform shoes. The chorus dances and shouts commentary. The crowd reacts loudly. Booing is normal. Throwing fruit is not uncommon. One man falls asleep. Wake him up with a sandal. This is not Netflix. It is a participation sport, and the stakes are real. The city Dionysia is a competition. Playwrights compete for honor, recognition, and prizes. Their works are judged, their reputations made or broken. Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, the great tragedians, were celebrities and rivals, and at the end a jury votes on who wins. Imagine crying through a 5-hour tragedy, only to watch a play about flatulence take first prize. But through the discomfort, something extraordinary happens. Collective catharsis, shared emotional experience. Thousands of individuals becoming briefly one entity, weeping together, laughing together, contemplating fate and free will together. Theatre is not escape. It is confrontation with your deepest fears, with political realities, with human nature itself, all while sitting on a stone seat with a numb backside and a sunburned nose. Philosophy, unavoidable and aggressively personal. You think you are safe. You are done with your chores. You are walking home. You are chewing barley and staring at the sunset. Then you hear it. Excuse me. What is justice? You turn. It is a man in a robe. No shoes. Big beard. Intense eyes. Socrates. He is about to ruin your evening. You say something simple like justice is fairness. And he begins, what is fairness? Is fairness the same for everyone? Can one act be both fair and unjust? 3 hours later you are sweating, panicking, and questioning whether reality exists. He is not trying to help. He is trying to break your confidence in your own thoughts. And it works. This is not philosophy as academic discipline. It is philosophy as ambush. It happens in public spaces. It interrupts daily life. It disrupts comfortable assumptions. The marketplace becomes a classroom. The wrestling ground becomes a lecture hall. The drinking party becomes a symposium, not just of wine, but of ideas. And he is not the only one. There is Plato, spinning wild metaphors about caves and forms. There is Aristotle categorizing everything in sight, from government to eels. There is Diogenes living in a ceramic jar, masturbating in public, and telling Alexander the Great to move out of his sunlight. There are Stoics, Epicureans, cynics, skeptics, each with their own approach to the good life. Philosophy is not a university subject. It is a lifestyle. It happens in the streets, the baths, the market. You do not escape it. You get absorbed by it. And the questions are not abstract academic exercises. They are urgent, practical concerns. How should we govern ourselves? What makes a life worth living? How do we face death? What do we owe each other? These questions shape policies, influence laws, determine social structures. They are not ivory tower musings. They are the foundation of civilization itself. And even children are not safe. Aristotle once tutored a teenager named Alexander, the same one who would later conquer half the known world. Ideas have consequences. Sometimes they reshape continents. So yes, philosophy is a big deal, and also a headache. The final truth. Would you survive? Let us recap. You have been sunburned, starved, sliced by a strigil, shouted at by a philosopher. You have eaten bread that tastes like roof tiles. You have walked barefoot over sharp rocks. You have prayed to angry gods, fetched dirty water, and tried not to sneeze during a sacred rite. And this is just one day. Would you last? No. You would not. You would fold before breakfast. You would cry by noon. You would be banished by midweek for asking if anyone else was itchy. You would miss pillows and hand soap, and Google and ibuprofen. But here is the thing. They survived. And more than that, they built something in the middle of all that chaos and suffering. They carved statues that still stand. They wrote plays we still perform. They debated ethics, government, love, the universe. They told stories of gods and monsters and stories of themselves, and they left those stories behind. For us, the legacy they left behind you would not last a day. But they did not just last. They endured. They endured war and death and injustice. They endured without answers, without guarantees, without comfort. And still they thought. They questioned. They dreamed. Democracy was not perfect, but it was planted. Philosophy was not easy, but it was born. Medicine was primitive, but it began. Everything we take for granted came from the minds and hands of people who had nothing. So yes, They wore tunics and ate burnt bread and yelled in public forums. But they also built the foundation of the world we live in, not because they were gods, but because they were stubborn and curious and human. So the next time someone tells you ancient Greece was all toga parties and epics, tell them about the lice, the lashings, the lack of underwear, and then tell them this: they were not perfect, but they were brilliant, and we are still trying to catch up. The Trojan War. Myth, memory, and archaeological reality. Before there were temples, statues, or philosophers in sandals, there was a war, not necessarily a real one, or at least not exactly as told, but one that every Greek knew by heart. The Trojan War was more than a bedtime story. It was the origin myth of Greek heroism told in epic hexameter sung by bards, burned into clay, echoed in marble. The epic tradition how Greeks remembered Troy. For the ancient Greeks, the Trojan War was not ancient history. It was foundational mythology, living cultural memory, the equivalent of a shared national origin story, though set in what Greeks considered their distant past, somewhere around the 12th or 13th centuries before the Common Era. The war's legacy permeated every aspect of Greek civilization. Homer's epic poems, the Iliad and the Odyssey, served as the primary vehicles for this cultural memory, composed around the 8th century before the Common Era, several hundred years after the purported events. These were not historical documents in the modern sense. They were poetic masterpieces, transmitted orally by specialized bards. The Iliad does not actually cover the entire war, just a few weeks during its 10th year, focusing primarily on the wrath of Achilles after Agamemnon takes his war prize, the captive woman Briseis. It does not include the famous Trojan horse, Helen's abduction, or even the fall of Troy. The narrative ends with Hector's funeral. The Odyssey picks up the story afterward, chronicling Odysseus's 10-year journey home to Ithaca. The full narrative cycle, including Paris's judgment, Helen's abduction, the gathering of Greek forces, the horse, stratagem, and Troy's destruction, was told across a collection of poems known as the Epic Cycle. Works like the Cypria, the Little Iliad, the Iliou-Persis, Sack of Ilium, and the Nostoi Returns fleshed out the complete saga. These poems survive only in fragments and summaries, but they informed countless artistic representations of Trojan war scenes on pottery, sculptural friezes, and wall paintings throughout the Mediterranean world. For Greek audiences, these stories were not mere entertainment. They were cultural touchstones, religious texts, and historical records all rolled into one. Public performances of Homeric poetry formed a cornerstone of festivals like the Panathenaea in Athens, where professional rhapsodes competed in multi-day recitations from memory. These performances unified communities around shared narrative heritage and reinforced collective identity. The characters from the Trojan cycle became archetypes in Greek culture. Achilles embodied martial excellence, and the tragic hero whose greatness comes with fatal flaws. Odysseus represented cunning intelligence and resourcefulness in the face of overwhelming odds. Hector stood for duty, honor, and defending one's family and city, even against impossible odds. Paris became the cautionary tale of choosing pleasure over responsibility. Helen represented both the dangerous power of feminine beauty and the complex question of female agency. Real Greek families claimed descent from these epic heroes, establishing their legitimacy through genealogical connections to the Trojan War era. The Macedonian royal family claimed Achilles as an ancestor. The Athenian statesman Cimon made political hay of retrieving the supposed bones of Theseus. Alexander the Great kept a copy of the Iliad, annotated by Aristotle, under his pillow during campaigns, and deliberately enacted parallels to Achilles throughout his military career. The gods take sides. Divine politics in the Trojan War. No Greek would have imagined the Trojan War without divine participation. The gods did not merely observe the conflict, they actively shaped it, using mortal heroes as proxies in their celestial disagreements. This divine involvement was not a literary device for Greeks. It reflected the fundamental reality of how their cosmos operated. The conflict began with divine machinations at the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, Achille Paron, where Eris, goddess of discord, tossed the golden apple, inscribed for the fairest. 3 goddesses claimed it: Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite. Zeus wisely recused himself from judging and appointed Paris, Prince of Troy, to decide. Each goddess offered Paris bribes. Hera promised political power and dominion over all Asia. Athena offered military glory and unparalleled wisdom. Aphrodite promised him the most beautiful woman in the world, Helen. Already married to Menelaus of Sparta, Paris chose Aphrodite's gift, earning the eternal enmity of Hera and Athena, who became implacable enemies of Troy. This divine grudge guaranteed Troy's eventual destruction. Throughout the war, gods directly intervened on the battlefield. Apollo sent plague arrows into the Greek camp. Aphrodite rescued Paris from certain death in single combat. Athena guided Diomedes' spear, allowing him to wound Ares himself. Poseidon strengthened the Greek defenses, while Apollo helped the Trojans breach them. Zeus enforced cosmic balance by ensuring his divine plan unfolded despite other gods' interference. The Greeks understood these divine interventions as explanations for otherwise inexplicable events in battle. Sudden reversals of fortune, inexplicable courage or cowardice, weather changes affecting military operations, and the superhuman achievements of great warriors. Divine machinery did not diminish human agency, but contextualized it within a universe where humans and gods shared the stage of cosmic drama. For Greek audiences, the Trojan War exemplified how mortals become entangled in divine conflicts, sometimes as instruments, sometimes as collateral damage. Religious festivals throughout Greece commemorated aspects of the Trojan cycle, with rituals at Sparta honoring Helen, athletic competitions at various sites dedicated to fallen heroes, and dramatic performances retelling episodes from the conflict. 1,000 ships, the Greek coalition. According to tradition, 1,000 ships sailed because one man could not keep his hands to himself. Paris, Trojan Prince, part-time himbo, as your modern text colorfully puts it, stole Helen, the wife of Menelaus, king of Sparta. Menelaus, understandably upset, called on his brother Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, for help, and Agamemnon called everyone. The so-called catalogue of ships in Book 2 of the Iliad provides an exhaustive and exhausting inventory of the Greek contingents who answered this call to arms. This catalogue reflects not just poetic imagination, but political reality in the late Bronze Age Aegean, when Mycenaean civilization dominated Greece through a network of palace-centered kingdoms. The Greek forces, collectively called Achaeans, Danans, or Argives in Homeric poetry, included contingents from across the Greek mainland, islands, and western Anatolian coast. They represented a loose coalition rather than a unified army, with complex power dynamics and frequent infighting Key leaders included Agamemnon, king of Mycenae, the expedition's commander-in-chief, more by virtue of his superior resources than universal acclaim; Menelaus, king of Sparta, Helen's aggrieved husband, and the war's casus belli; Achilles, prince of Phthia, commanding the Myrmidons, and acknowledged as the greatest warrior; Odysseus, king of Ithaca, renowned for his strategic intelligence and diplomatic skills; Ajax the Greater from Salamis, a massive warrior, second only to Achilles in martial prowess; Ajax the Lesser from Locris, known for his speed and increasingly problematic temper; Diomedes of Argos, a young but formidable fighter who wounded gods in battle; Nestor of Pylos, elderly but respected for his wisdom and experience; Idomeneus of Crete, representing Minoan contributions to the alliance. This coalition reflected the political realities of Mycenaean Greece, where powerful Wainax kings controlled regional territories from fortified citadels, but none could claim absolute authority over others. Agamemnon's leadership remained contested throughout the conflict, particularly by Achilles, whose withdrawal from fighting drives the Iliad's central plot. Archaeological evidence confirms that Mycenaean Greece operated through complex alliance networks capable of projecting military power across the Aegean. Linear B tablets from Pylos reference coastal watches and defensive preparations, suggesting real concerns about naval warfare, while a literal 1,000 ships is poetic hyperbole. Mycenaean Greece possessed significant maritime capabilities that could support large-scale expeditionary warfare. Troy, the city and its defenders. The city the Greeks besieged was not called Troy by its inhabitants. They called it Ilios or Wilios, giving us Iliad, or sometimes Troia, the region rather than just the city, located in northwest Anatolia near the Dardanelles, the ancient Hellespont. Its strategic position controlled access between the Aegean and Black Seas, creating both prosperity and vulnerability. Homer portrays Troy as a wealthy, cosmopolitan city with impressive walls, multiple gates, and towering structures, including Priam's palace. The city's defenders included not just Trojans, but allies from across Anatolia and beyond, including Lycians, Carians, Thracians, and even Ethiopians. This multicultural alliance reflected Troy's status as a trading hub connecting Europe, Asia, and indirectly Africa. The Trojan royal family centered around Priam, the elderly king, with allegedly 50 sons and 50 daughters from multiple wives. Key figures included Hector, Priam's eldest legitimate son, and Troy's primary defender, Paris, also called Alexander, whose abduction of Helen precipitated the conflict; Cassandra, a princess and prophet cursed to speak true prophecies no one would believe; Deiphobus, who married Helen after Paris's death; Troilus, whose early death was prophesied to doom the city; Aeneas, Priam's cousin, who, according to later Roman tradition, escaped the city's fall and founded Rome. Troy's most famous feature, its supposedly impregnable walls, held immense significance. Greek tradition attributed these walls to the gods Poseidon and Apollo during their temporary servitude to the Trojan king Laomedon. These divine origins explained both the wall's strength and foreshadowed their eventual downfall, as Laomedon had cheated the gods of their promised payment for 10 years. These walls frustrated Greek attempts to take the city by force. The resulting stalemate led to the expansion of the conflict across the Troad region, with the Greeks raiding surrounding towns and islands to maintain supplies and pressure Troy through attrition. This pattern of warfare, combining siege operations with wider territorial raiding, aligns with evidence for late Bronze Age conflict strategies. The archaeological reality, Heinrich Schliemann and beyond. For centuries, educated Europeans considered the Trojan War purely mythological. This changed dramatically when German businessman Heinrich Schliemann, using the Iliad as his guide, began excavations at Hisarlik in northwest Turkey in the year 1870. Schliemann, though more treasure hunter than scientific archaeologist by modern standards, I made a groundbreaking discovery, a series of ancient settlements built one atop another spanning thousands of years. Schliemann, Priam's treasure, a cache of gold, was associated with Homer's Troy. Though we now know these predate the probable Trojan War era by centuries, modern archaeological analysis identifies Troy 6 and Troy 7a, 1750 to 1180 before the Common Era, as the most likely candidate for Homer's city based on dating and evidence of destruction. What does archaeology reveal about historical Troy? It was a significant walled city of approximately 6 hectares. Within the walls, the impressive fortifications included stone walls, up to 5 meters thick at the base. Its location near the Dardanelles made it strategically important for controlling trade. The city shows evidence of earthquakes and at least one significant destruction by fire. Material culture indicates connections with both Mycenaean Greece and Anatolian civilizations. Excavations at Mycenaean palace sites in Greece confirm that Bronze Age Greeks possessed the military capacity and political organization to launch overseas military expeditions. Linear B tablets mention coastal watchmen and military preparations, suggesting concerns about marine-based threats. Archaeological evidence from sites across Greece shows widespread destruction during the late 13th and early 12th centuries before the Common Era, coinciding with the broader Bronze Age collapse that affected the entire Eastern Mediterranean. Was there actually a Trojan War? Modern scholarship suggests the Homeric epics likely preserve cultural memory of real conflicts between Mycenaean Greeks and the inhabitants of northwest Anatolia during the late Bronze Age. The specifics, a 10-year siege over an abducted queen, are likely poetic elaborations on smaller-scale conflicts, possibly multiple campaigns compressed into a singular narrative. The discovery of Hittite texts mentioning a western Anatolian kingdom called Walusa, phonetically similar to Greek Wilios or Ilios, conflicts with a coalition called Ahiawa, possibly Achaeans, and even references to a disputed ruler named Alexandu, similar to Paris's alternate name Alexander, provides tantalizing hints that the epic tradition preserved distorted memories of actual geopolitical conflicts. Famous heroes. Infamous deaths. The Greek mythological tradition is full of dramatic deaths, but the Trojan War accumulated a particularly impressive body count of legendary heroes. Their deaths were not just plot points, but carried deeper significance about fate, glory, and the cost of war. Achilles, supposedly invulnerable except for his heel, met his end when Paris, guided by Apollo, shot an arrow into his vulnerable spot. His death fulfilled multiple prophecies and highlighted the inevitability of fate. Achilles had explicitly chosen a short, glorious life over a long, unremarkable one, making his death not just inevitable, but definitional to his heroic status. Ajax the Greater, after losing a competition for Achilles' armor to Odysseus, went mad with grief and shame, slaughtered livestock, believing they were Greek leaders, then committed suicide by falling on his sword when he regained sanity. His death represented the psychological wounds of war that could destroy even the mightiest warriors. Paris himself was wounded by a poisoned arrow, sought healing from his abandoned first wife, Oenone, who refused and died in agony. His ignoble end contrasted with heroic deaths on the battlefield, emphasizing his character's moral weakness. Hector, Troy's greatest defender, died at Achilles' hands in single combat, his body then desecrated by being dragged around the city walls. His funeral concludes the Iliad, providing a moment of shared humanity amid the brutality of war. Priam, Troy's elderly king, was killed at his own palace altar by Achilles' son, Neoptolemus Pyrrhus, violating sacred guest host traditions and religious sanctuary. His death symbolized the complete collapse of civilization that Troy's fall represented. The deaths continued even after Troy's fall. Agamemnon returned home to be murdered in his bath by his wife Clytemnestra and her lover. Ajax the Lesser died in a shipwreck after offending Athena. Odysseus survived a decade of wandering, but, according to post-Homeric tradition, was eventually killed by his unrecognized son Telegonus. These elaborate death narratives were not just dramatic flourishes, but conveyed crucial cultural values about proper and improper endings. Dying gloriously, in battle like Hector, affirmed heroic values. Dying through treachery or madness cautioned against hubris or moral failure. For Greek audiences, how a hero died was as important as how they lived. The Trojan horse, clever ruse, or seismic metaphor. Eventually, someone said, "What if we build a giant horse and hide inside it and hope the Trojans are very gullible?" And somehow that worked. The Trojan horse represents perhaps the most famous stratagem in literary history, yet Homer's Iliad never describes it. The story appears in the Odyssey only as a brief reference. Our fullest ancient account comes from Virgil's Aeneid, written centuries later for a Roman audience. According to tradition, the Greeks constructed a massive wooden horse, ostensibly as an offering to Athena. They appeared to sail away, but actually hid nearby. The Trojans, after debate, pulled the horse inside their walls as a victory trophy. During the night, Greek warriors hidden inside emerged, opened the gates for the returned Greek army, and Troy fell to fire and slaughter. This colorful story has prompted skepticism since antiquity. Alternative ancient explanations suggested the horse was actually a siege engine resembling a horse, that it represented a naval metaphor where horse referred to ships, or that the horse was a symbol on the gate or section of wall the Greeks breached. Modern scholars have proposed additional possibilities. The horse might symbolize Poseidon, god of horses and earthquakes, referencing a seismic event that damaged Troy's walls. It could represent a misunderstanding of a Mesopotamian ritual where a wooden horse was burned as an offering. The narrative might encode memories of actual siege tactics using deception. Archaeological evidence neither confirms nor refutes the horse story specifically. Troy 6 shows evidence of earthquake damage, while Troy 7b exhibits signs of fire destruction. Either scenario could have been mythologized into the horse narrative over centuries of oral transmission. What remains historically significant is how the Trojan horse became emblematic of Greek cultural values around Metis cunning intelligence rather than just brute force. The stratagem represents the triumph of Odyssean guile over traditional heroic warfare, foreshadowing the classical Greek embrace of cleverness alongside courage. The aftermath, burning cities and difficult returns. Troy burned, the Greeks won, and Achilles, he died from an arrow to the ankle. After everything, The sack of Troy was portrayed in Greek art and literature as exceptionally brutal, even by ancient warfare standards. The Ilio-Persis sack of Ilium detailed atrocities, including the murder of King Priam at Zeus's altar. The infant Astyanax, Hector's son, thrown from the city walls. Cassandra dragged from Athena's temple and raped. Polyxena sacrificed at Achilles' tomb. And Trojan women distributed as prizes among the Greek leaders. These violations of wartime religious and moral customs reportedly angered the gods, cursing many Greek leaders to difficult or fatal returns. Nostoi. These troubled homecomings included Odysseus wandering for 10 years before reaching Ithaca. Menelaus, blown off course to Egypt for 7 years. Ajax the Lesser drowned after boasting. He survived, despite the gods' anger. Agamemnon, murdered in his bath by his wife and her lover. And the prophet Calchas, dying of grief after being defeated in a prophecy contest. Only a few, like Nestor and Diomedes, enjoyed relatively peaceful returns. Archaeological evidence confirms widespread destruction of late Bronze Age sites throughout the eastern Mediterranean, around 1200 to 1150 before the Common Era. This period, known as the Bronze Age collapse, saw numerous palace centers burned and abandoned, population decline, loss of writing systems, and cultural disruption across Greece, Anatolia, the Levant, and Egypt. While multiple factors contributed to this collapse: climate change, natural disasters, internal rebellions, sea peoples' invasions, it provides a plausible historical backdrop for traditions about a fallen Troy and disrupted Greek kingdoms. The fall of Troy reverberated beyond Greek culture. Etruscan art depicted Trojan war scenes. Roman tradition claimed descent from Trojan refugees through Aeneas. Multiple European royal houses later traced their lineages to Trojan escapees. These appropriations demonstrate how the Trojan War transcended its original context to become a malleable symbol of civilizational conflict, heroism, and cultural legitimacy, legacy. The war that launched 1,000 stories. The Trojan War gave Greece its heroes. But more importantly, it gave it a story, and stories last longer than empires. The cultural impact of the Trojan cycle extends far beyond ancient Greece. Homer's epics established literary conventions still recognizable today: the tragic hero, the reluctant warrior, in medias res narrative structure, divine machinery, and epic catalogues. The Iliad's exploration of rage, honor, mortality, and reconciliation continues to resonate across cultures. In ancient Greece itself, the Trojan War provided a shared cultural touchstone, uniting politically diverse Greek states, a chronological anchor for reckoning heroic genealogies, subject matter for countless artworks on pottery, sculpture, and architectural friezes, the foundation for tragic drama with Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, all writing plays based on Trojan War characters, a baseline for philosophical discussions about ethics, fate, and divine justice. Even the supposed historical chronology of ancient Greece hinged on the Trojan War, with events dated as happening so many generations before or after Troy's fall. The 5th century before the Common Era historian Thucydides used the Trojan War as a point of comparison when describing the Peloponnesian War's scale and significance. Archaeological work continues at Troy, Hyssalic, and relevant Mycenaean sites, refining our understanding of late Bronze Age conflict in the region. Interdisciplinary research, combining archaeology with Hittite texts, and linguistic analysis, continues to uncover potential historical kernels within the epic tradition. What remains most significant historically is how the Trojan War narrative functioned as cultural technology, creating shared identity through collective storytelling. It provided Greeks with heroic exemplars, cautionary tales, and a framework for understanding conflict and suffering. It explained current political realities through mythologized history. It offered emotional catharsis through artistic representation of extreme human experiences. Whether or not the war happened exactly as described, it almost certainly did not. The story of Troy shaped how Greeks understood themselves, their neighbors, their gods, and their place in history. The war's greatest victory was not the sacking of a city, but the creation of a narrative that has outlasted bronze, marble, and the civilizations that first told it. As the 19th century archaeologist Heinrich Schliemann supposedly telegraphed when he believed he had found Priam's Troy, "I have gazed upon the face of Agamemnon." The historical accuracy of both his claim and the broader Trojan tradition remains debatable, but their emotional and cultural power is undeniable. The Trojan War represents not just a possible Bronze Age conflict, but humanity's enduring need to transform violence and suffering into meaningful narrative. The Persian Wars, the small flame against a giant empire. Now, let us fast forward a few centuries from the mythical Trojan War to documented history. Greece is not one country. It is a family reunion gone wrong. Dozens of independent city-states constantly arguing, occasionally stabbing, each polis with its own government, laws, dialect, and patron deities, united only by language, religion, and a shared tendency to hold grudges for centuries. The tinderbox, how it all began. The clash between Greece and Persia did not erupt from nowhere. Its roots trace back to the Ionian Greek colonies along the western coast of Anatolia, modern Turkey. These Greek settlements had fallen under Persian control during the expansionist campaigns of Cyrus the Great in the mid-6th century, before the Common Era. Initially, Persian rule was relatively hands-off, operating through local Greek tyrants who served as Persian vassals. The trouble began in 499, before the Common Era, with the Ionian Revolt. Aristagoras, the Persian-appointed tyrant of Miletus, facing personal political troubles, decided to rally the Ionian Greeks against their Persian overlords. Seeking allies, he sailed to mainland Greece, appealing first to Sparta, who refused, and then to Athens, who agreed to send a modest force of 20 ships. This Athenian intervention proved fateful, together with the Eretrians, who contributed 5 ships. The allied Greeks marched inland and burned the regional Persian capital at Sardis in 498 before the Common Era. Though the rebels were driven back to the coast and eventually defeated, the Persians would not forget Athens' involvement. As the revolt was crushed in 494, before the Common Era, with Miletus brutally sacked, King Darius I reportedly asked an aide to remind him 3 times daily, "Master, remember the Athenians." The stage was set for a collision between the world's largest empire and a collection of fractious city-states that could not agree on anything except that they did not want to be Persian. David versus Goliath, the might of Persia. But then came Persia, a mega empire with elephants, gold, and lots of soldiers, led by emperors with names that sound like thunder, Darius and Xerxes. The Persian Empire, under Darius, the first 522 to 486, before the Common Era, was unprecedented in human history. It stretched from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea. From the steppes of Central Asia to the cataracts of the Nile, an estimated 50 million people, nearly half the world's population, lived under Persian rule. Its administrative achievements were remarkable: standardized coinage, an imperial postal system, a network of royal roads spanning thousands of miles, and a sophisticated bureaucracy organized into 20 satrapies, or provinces. The great king ruled from magnificent palace complexes at Susa, Persepolis, Ecbatana, and Babylon. Tribute flowed from every corner of the empire, in staggering quantities: 4,680 Babylonian talents of silver, annually equivalent to about 180 tons, along with gold, precious stones, exotic animals, spices, and luxury goods. The Persian treasury at Persepolis held wealth beyond Greek comprehension. The Persian military reflected this imperial scale. Its standing army, the Immortals, consisted of 10,000 elite infantry, so named because they were immediately replaced when killed, keeping their number constant. Beyond this elite corps, Persia could theoretically mobilize forces, numbering hundreds of thousands drawn from subject peoples across the empire. Their cavalry was the finest in the known world, their archers unmatched in number and training, their naval forces drawn from Phoenician, Egyptian, and Ionian subjects who were master shipbuilders and sailors. By contrast, Athens could field perhaps 10,000 hoplite infantry at maximum effort. Sparta fewer still, even combined. The Greek city-states represented a tiny fraction of Persian military potential in wealth, territory, population, and military might. The mismatch seemed absurd, like a confrontation between modern nations and individual city neighborhoods. Persia wanted Greece. Greece said, "Come try Marathon, the run that made history." In 490 before the Common Era, Darius dispatched a punitive expedition led by his generals Datis and Artaphernes. After sacking Eretria and enslaving its population, the Persian force, estimated at 20,000 to 30,000 troops, landed at the Bay of Marathon, about 26 miles from Athens. The Athenians faced a critical decision. Some advocated defending behind the city walls, but the strategos, General Miltiades, argued for meeting the Persians at their landing site. A runner was dispatched to Sparta, requesting aid, but the Spartans, in the midst of a religious festival, delayed their departure. Only the small city of Plataea sent reinforcements, about 1,000 men, joining Athens' 9,000 to 10,000 hoplites. At Marathon, the Athenians stood alone, outnumbered and under-armored, and somehow won. The Battle of Marathon unfolded in late August or early September for several days. Both armies maintained position, neither willing to risk disadvantageous terrain. The Persians, with superior numbers and cavalry, preferred the open plain. The Greeks needed to neutralize these advantages. When the Persian cavalry temporarily withdrew, possibly to re-embark for a direct assault on Athens, Miltiades seized the opportunity. The Greek hoplite phalanx, heavily armored infantry, arranged in tight formation with overlapping shields and protruding spears, charged across the open ground toward the Persian lines. To cover more ground and prevent encirclement, Miltiades thinned the Greek center while reinforcing the wings. The battle itself lasted perhaps an hour. The stronger Greek wings drove back the Persian flanks, then wheeled inward to attack the Persian center from three sides. Despite initial success against the weakened Greek middle, the Persians found themselves surrounded. Their lines broke, with many retreating to their ships, while others were driven into the nearby marshes. Greek casualties numbered 192. Persian losses, perhaps 6,400. The remaining Persian force managed to re-embark, but Athens had achieved what seemed impossible victory against the world's superpower. One soldier ran back to Athens, 26.2 miles, shouted, "Victory," and died, which is why marathons exist. You are welcome. This famous story of Phidippides, or sometimes named Philippides, combines several traditions. Historical sources suggest a messenger named Philippides ran from Athens to Sparta before the battle, covering about 140 miles in 2 days to request aid. The dramatic run from Marathon to Athens after the victory, culminating in the messenger's death, appears in later sources, particularly Plutarch and Lucian, writing centuries after the events. Historically accurate, or not, the story captured the high drama of Athens's unexpected triumph and entered Western mythology. When the first modern Olympic Games were held in Athens in 1896, the marathon race was included to commemorate this legendary run, with the distance later standardized at 26.2 miles, or 42.195 kilometers. The significance of marathon extended far beyond military victory. For the Athenians, it demonstrated that their recently established democracy could defend itself against traditional monarchical power. The victory boosted confidence in democratic governance and catalyzed Athens' emergence as a dominant cultural and political force. Tactically, it proved that hoplite infantry could overcome numerically superior forces through discipline and maneuver. Strategically, however, Marathon merely postponed the Persian reckoning. Darius began preparing a larger invasion, only to die in 486 before the Common Era. The task of punishing the Greeks would fall to his son Xerxes I. Xerxes' Revenge, the second Persian invasion. Xerxes spent years preparing what ancient sources describe as the largest army ever assembled. Modern scholars debate the numbers. Herodotus's claim of 1,700,000 troops is certainly exaggerated, but even conservative estimates suggest a force exceeding 100,000 soldiers and 600 to 800 ships. The logistical preparations were staggering. Food depots were established along the planned route. A canal was dug through the Mount Athos Peninsula to avoid a previous naval disaster there. Bridges of boats were constructed across the Hellespont, modern Dardanelles, to allow the army to cross from Asia into Europe, and when a storm destroyed the first attempt, Herodotus tells us that Xerxes had the sea itself whipped as punishment. This time the Greek response was more coordinated, though far from unified. Under Athens' leadership, an alliance formed at a congress at the Isthmus of Corinth in 481 before the Common Era. Notable absences included Argos, Sparta's traditional rival, and Thebes, which would eventually, Medazers, join the Persian side. The oracle at Delphi initially offered discouraging prophecies, advising cities to flee or prepare for destruction, before providing the cryptic suggestion that a wooden wall would save Athens. The allied Greeks developed a two-part strategy. The army would attempt to block the Persian advance at the narrow pass of Thermopylae, while the navy engaged the Persian fleet at nearby Artemisium. If both positions held, Xerxes' massive force would be unable to supply itself in the barren mountain terrain. Then came Thermopylae. 300 Spartans and a few thousand friends held off Xerxes' army in a narrow pass. They fought, they fell, but their stand bought time. In reality, the Greek force at Thermopylae consisted of approximately 7,000 men from various city-states, including the 300 Spartans led by King Leonidas. The narrow coastal pass with mountains on one side and the sea on the other, neutralized Persia's numerical advantage. For 2 days, the Greeks successfully repelled frontal assaults, including attacks by the elite immortals. The turning point came when a local Greek named Ephialtes revealed to Xerxes a mountain path that allowed Persian forces to outflank the Greek position. Learning of this betrayal, Leonidas dismissed most of the allied contingents, remaining with his 300 Spartans, about 700 Thespians who refused to withdraw, and 400 Thebans of questionable loyalty. On the third day, knowing they faced certain death, Leonidas and his remaining forces fought to the last man. Their sacrifice was not militarily decisive. The pass fell and the Persian advance continued, but it achieved significant propaganda value, demonstrating Greek willingness to die for freedom and establishing a moral victory that far outlasted the tactical defeat. Simultaneously, the naval battle at Artemisium ended inconclusively, with both fleets suffering significant damage from combat and storms. With Thermopylae lost, the Greek fleet withdrew southward. Athens burns. Athens rises. With northern Greece overrun, Athens faced a critical decision. The Spartan strategy favored defending the Isthmus of Corinth, essentially abandoning Athens. The Athenian leader, Themistocles, however, championed a naval strategy based on his interpretation of the wooden walls prophecy as referring to ships, not fortifications. In an extraordinary evacuation, the entire population of Athens relocated to the nearby island of Salamis and other locations. When Persian forces entered the emptied city in September 480 before the Common Era, they found only a small group of defenders barricaded on the Acropolis, who were quickly overcome. Xerxes ordered Athens burned to the ground, with particular attention to destroying religious sanctuaries in retaliation for the burning of Sardis decades earlier. Then came Salamis, a sea battle. The Persian fleet entered a tight strait, and the Greeks with smaller, faster ships outmaneuvered them. The Persian navy sank, and with it, their dreams of conquest. The naval battle of Salamis proved decisive for the entire conflict. The Greek fleet, primarily Athenian and led by Themistocles, numbered about 380 triremes, Persian vessels. Through a combination of tactical skill and deception, were sunk or captured. Themistocles sent false information to Xerxes, suggesting the Greeks were in disarray and planning to flee. He lured the Persian navy into the narrow straits between Salamis and the mainland. In these confined waters, the Persians could not utilize their superior numbers. Greeks, equipped with bronze rams and crewed by experienced oarsmen, maneuvered more effectively in the tight space. The heavier Persian ships found themselves unable to turn, retreat, or support each other. By day's end, perhaps 200 to 300 Persian ships had been sunk or captured, compared to around 40 Greek vessels lost. Xerxes, watching from a throne on the shore, witnessed the destruction of a significant portion of his naval power. Without naval supremacy, his massive army faced potential supply problems as winter approached. Xerxes himself returned to Asia with part of his forces, leaving his general Mardonius with a still formidable army to continue the campaign the following year. Plataea and Mycale, the final victories the following year, 479 before the Common Era, saw the conflict's conclusion at the Battle of Plataea in August. The largest hoplite army ever assembled, perhaps 40,000 Greeks, led by the Spartan regent, Pausanias, faced Mardonius's remaining forces, estimated at 70,000. to 120,000. After days of maneuvering and skirmishing, the Greeks achieved a decisive victory. Mardonius was killed, and the Persian forces disintegrated. Simultaneously, at Cape Mycale on the Anatolian coast, the Greek fleet destroyed the remnants of Persian naval power and sparked fresh revolts among the Ionian Greeks. These twin victories effectively ended the Persian invasion threat. And suddenly Greece, tiny, poor, chaotic Greece, had defeated the biggest empire in the world. Not bad for a bunch of guys in linen skirts and bad tempers. Legacy: how the Persian Wars changed everything. The Greek victory transformed Mediterranean geopolitics and culture in several crucial ways. Athenian ascendance: the victories, particularly at Salamis, elevated Athens' status and confidence. Athens would transform its anti-Persian alliance, the Delian League, into an empire of its own over the following decades. Cultural flourishing: the half-century following the Persian Wars saw unprecedented cultural achievement in Athens, including the tragedies of Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides, the comedies of Aristophanes, the historical writings of Herodotus and Thucydides, the philosophical inquiries of Socrates, and the architectural marvels of the Periclean building program, including the Parthenon. Historical consciousness: the Persian Wars created a watershed moment in Greek self-definition, crystallizing notions of freedom versus tyranny, West versus East. Herodotus, the father of history, structured his groundbreaking work around this conflict. Military innovation: the victories validated Greek military methods, while revealing the importance of combined land-sea operations. Naval power would become increasingly central to Mediterranean geopolitics. Pan-Hellenic identity: while Greek disunity would soon reassert itself, the memory of cooperation against Persia established an ideal of Pan-Hellenic action that would influence political thought for generations. The victories also entered Western cultural mythology as a founding narrative of freedom defending itself against despotism, a framing that, while historically oversimplified, has informed Western self-conception for millennia. Archaeological evidence from this period includes the serpent column dedicated at Delphi to commemorate the Greek alliance, the remains of the Persian destruction layer in Athens, and numerous Persian artifacts recovered from battle sites. These physical remnants corroborate the historical accounts while providing tangible connections to this pivotal moment in Western civilization. The Peloponnesian War, when democracy ate itself. Now that Greece had survived Persia, it did what Greece does best: turn on itself. The rise of two superpowers in the aftermath of the Persian Wars. Two distinct Greek power blocks emerged, centered around Athens and Sparta, cities with dramatically different cultures, governments, and geopolitical orientations. Athens rich, proud, sea-powered, democratic, following their pivotal role in the naval victory at Salamis. The Athenians established the Delian League in 478 before the Common Era, ostensibly to continue operations against Persia. Initially headquartered on the sacred island of Delos, this alliance included most Aegean islands and coastal cities, each member either contributing ships or paying tribute for Athens to maintain the common fleet. Over the following decades, Athens gradually transformed this voluntary alliance into an empire when member states attempted to withdraw, as Naxos did around 467 before the Common Era and Thasos in 465. Athens used military force to compel continued participation. By 454 before the Common Era, the treasury had been relocated from Delos to Athens itself, and tribute was increasingly used for Athenian projects, like the Parthenon. League members became subjects in all but name. This naval empire fueled Athens' economic prosperity. Silver mines at Laurion provided capital, while control of maritime trade routes ensured grain imports from the Black Sea region, vital for feeding Athens' growing population. Cultural life flourished under Pericles' leadership 461 to 429 before the Common Era, with democratic institutions expanding to include paid jury service and other offices accessible to common citizens. Sparta disciplined, grim, land-powered, militaristic, while Athens looked outward to the sea. Sparta remained focused on controlling its immediate territory, particularly its enslaved Hello population, which outnumbered Spartan citizens by perhaps 7-1. The threat of Helot rebellion shaped every aspect of Spartan society, from its militarized education system agog to its dual kingship and conservative political institutions. Sparta led the Peloponnesian League, a more loosely structured alliance controlling most of southern Greece. Unlike Athens' increasingly direct rule, Sparta generally preferred installing friendly, oligarchic governments in allied states while leaving them substantial autonomy, provided they followed Sparta's foreign policy and provided troops when requested. The clash between these powers, one, democratic, commercial, and maritime, the other oligarchic, agricultural, and land-based, would determine Greece's future trajectory. Opposites, frenemies, bound for disaster. The Peloponnesian War was not just a conflict, it was a decades-long slow-motion collapse. Started in 431, before the Common Era, and ended in 404. Almost 30 years of betrayal, plague, famine, and backstabbing. The tensions between these power blocks erupted into open warfare through a series of proxy conflicts. In 460 to 445, the so-called First Peloponnesian War saw Athens and Sparta support opposing sides in various local disputes, including civil wars in Megara and Boeotia. This period ended with the 30 Years' Peace of 445 before the Common Era, which briefly stabilized relations. By 435, however, new flashpoints emerged. Athens interfered in a dispute between Corinth, a key Spartan ally, and its colony Corcyra, modern Corfu. Then, in 432 before the Common Era, Athens imposed severe economic sanctions on Megara, another Spartan ally, effectively strangling its economy. When Sparta demanded these sanctions be revoked, Athens refused. The underlying causes went beyond these specific incidents. Thucydides, our primary historical source and a participant in the war, famously attributed the conflict to the growth of Athenian power and the fear which this caused in Sparta. This security dilemma, Athenian expansion creating Spartan insecurity, Spartan countermeasures, fueling Athenian paranoia, made conflict virtually inevitable. Athens had an empire of allies. Sparta had allies who hated being allies. The fundamental strategic situation favored neither side conclusively. Athens possessed overwhelming naval superiority, considerable financial reserves from imperial tribute and silver mines, and impregnable walls connecting the city to its port at Piraeus. Sparta and its allies dominated numerically superior land forces and could devastate Attic agriculture. Neither could directly threaten the other's core strength. Pericles' initial strategy acknowledged this reality. He evacuated the Attic countryside, bringing the rural population within Athens' walls, and refused to engage Sparta's superior hoplite forces in pitched battle. Instead, naval raids would pressure Spartan allies, while Athens' maritime commerce and empire remained intact. This war of attrition assumed Athens could outlast Sparta economically. Plague, death, and disaster. This strategy faced its first severe test in the form of a devastating plague that struck Athens in 430 to 429 before the Common Era. Likely introduced through the port of Piraeus, with the population densely concentrated behind the city walls, the disease spread rapidly, killing perhaps 75,000 to 100,000 people, approximately 1/4 of the city's population. Pericles himself succumbed in 429 before the Common Era, depriving Athens of its most experienced leader at a critical juncture. Thucydides, who survived the plague, described its symptoms and social impacts in clinical detail. Beyond the immediate death toll, the disease undermined Athenian social cohesion and religious confidence. Traditional funeral practices collapsed as bodies accumulated. Religious prohibitions lost force as people saw others die before them so quickly. The psychological trauma complemented the physical devastation. The war dragged on. Cities switched sides. Ships burned. Crops died. Everyone blamed the gods. Fighting continued inconclusively until 421 before the Common Era, when both sides, exhausted by 10 years of conflict, agreed to the Peace of Nissus. This treaty was supposed to last 50 years, but began unraveling almost immediately through proxy conflicts and technical violations. Also, and the Sicilian disaster. Athenian politics in this period grew increasingly factionalized, with the controversial aristocrat, Alcibiades, emerging as a dominant figure, charming, brilliant, and utterly unscrupulous. Alcibiades advocated for a more aggressive strategy. In 415 before the Common Era, he persuaded the Athenian assembly to launch a massive expedition against Syracuse in Sicily, ostensibly to help allies, but clearly aimed at imperial expansion. At one point, Athens accidentally slaughtered the wrong neutral island. Another time, they sent an entire fleet to Sicily and lost it. The Sicilian expedition ranks among history's great military disasters. As the force prepared to depart, a religious scandal erupted when sacred statues, the Hermes, were vandalized throughout Athens. Alcibiades, implicated in the sacrilege. I was recalled from command, but defected to Sparta rather than face trial, providing the enemy with intimate knowledge of Athenian plans. The expedition itself started cautiously under Nicias's leadership, then bogged down in a protracted siege of Syracuse. Despite committing the majority of their naval power, at least 200 ships and approximately 40,000 men, the Athenians faced competent Syracusan resistance. Bolstered by Spartan assistance, the entire force was eventually destroyed, with most survivors enslaved in the Sicilian stone quarries. This catastrophe fundamentally altered the war's trajectory. Athens had lost perhaps 10,000 trained rowers, irreplaceable maritime expertise, along with a significant portion of its fleet and prestige. Revolts immediately broke out across the Athenian Empire, while Sparta, now receiving Persian financial support, built up its own naval capacity. Democracy in crisis. The disaster in Sicily triggered political crisis in Athens. In 411 before the Common Era, oligarchic sympathizers overthrew the democracy, establishing the regime of the 400, which attempted to negotiate with Sparta. This government collapsed after only a few months, when the Athenian fleet, still democratic in sympathy, refused to recognize it. A modified constitution, the 5000, followed briefly before full democracy was restored in 410 before the Common Era. Despite these political convulsions and diminished resources, Athens achieved surprising military resurgence between 410 and 406 before the Common Era. A revitalized fleet under commanders like Alcibiades, now repatriated, won several significant naval victories, most notably at Arginusae in 406 before the Common Era. However, this final Athenian resurgence contained the seeds of its own destruction. After the Arginusae victory, a sudden storm prevented the retrieval of survivors from damaged ships. The Athenian assembly, increasingly volatile and desperate, executed 6 of the 8 generals who had just achieved this crucial victory, effectively decapitating their own military leadership over a weather event beyond human control. The fall of Athens. The end came swiftly. In 405, before the Common Era, the Spartan admiral Lysander caught the Athenian fleet beached and unprepared at Aegospotami in the Hellespont. In a single stroke, virtually the entire Athenian navy was captured or destroyed. With control of the sea lanes, Sparta could now blockade Athens, preventing the vital grain imports from the Black Sea region. The siege that followed reduced Athens to starvation. In April 404, before the Common Era, the city surrendered. The terms were harsh, but could have been worse. Athens' walls were demolished, its fleet reduced to 12 ships, and its democracy replaced with an oligarchy of 30 men, later known as the 30 Tyrants, for their brutal rule. The empire was dismantled, with former subject states either joining the Spartan alliance or receiving nominal independence. Democracy strained, loyalty gone, hope fading. In the end, Sparta won. Sort of. Athens was shattered, its walls torn down, its empire gone. But Sparta did not enjoy the victory, because war had broken them too. The hollow victory. Greece after the war. The Peloponnesian War fundamentally altered the Greek world in several crucial ways. Power vacuum. Neither Sparta nor Athens emerged with the capacity to unify Greece. Sparta's attempted hegemony, from 404 to 371, before the Common Era, proved short-lived and unpopular, as Sparta lacked the administrative capacity to manage an empire and alienated former allies with heavy-handed policies. Persian resurgence. The conflict allowed Persia to regain influence in Greek affairs, first by financing Sparta, then by playing Greek states against each other. The King's Peace of 387 before the Common Era essentially gave Persia veto power over Greek affairs, an ironic outcome. 50 years after the Persian Wars. Economic devastation. The prolonged conflict depleted resources across Greece. Agricultural production declined due to yearly invasions. Maritime trade was disrupted, and population losses from combat, plague, and famine created long-term demographic challenges. Social cohesion. Traditional bonds of pan-Hellenic identity weakened as cities committed increasingly ruthless acts against other Greeks. Thucydides famously documented how words changed their meaning. Traditional concepts of moderation, justice, and restraint lost force in the struggle for survival. Military innovation. The war accelerated the trend toward professional armies and specialized troops rather than citizen militias, particularly evidenced by the rise of peltasts, light infantry, and the increased use of mercenaries. The war's true winner was neither Athens nor Sparta, but Macedon to the north. The exhaustion of the major Greek powers created an opportunity that Philip II would eventually exploit, culminating in Macedonian hegemony after the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 before the Common Era. Archaeological evidence from this period includes defensive structures, abandoned rural settlements, mass graves associated with the Athenian plague, and inscriptions documenting the financial strain of prolonged warfare. Material culture reflects increasing militarization alongside economic contraction. The war showed that the greatest threat to Greece was Greece. This Thucydidean insight that internal division posed a greater danger than external enemies would become a recurring theme in Western political thought. The Peloponnesian War demonstrated how security competition, economic rivalry, ideological differences, and status concerns could transform cooperation into catastrophic conflict, even among people sharing language, religion, and cultural heritage. In its brutality, complexity, and far-reaching consequences, this civil war of the Greek world provided lessons that remain relevant to international relations and political psychology in the modern era. It stands as a compelling case study in how great power competition, left unchecked, can destroy the very societies it purports to defend. Alexander the Great. One man, one empire, one meteoric rise. Just when you thought Greece was done, along came Alexander, the rise of Macedon not quite Greek, not quite barbarian, not Athenian, not Spartan Macedonian, which at the time was like being the cousin from the countryside with too many horses. Macedon occupied an ambiguous position in the Greek world, geographically situated on the northern fringe of the Greek peninsula, culturally and linguistically related to the Greeks, but distinct enough to prompt debate about their Greekness. The Macedonians spoke a Greek dialect, so thick that southern Greeks struggled to understand it. Their monarchy seemed archaic compared to Greek democracies and oligarchies. Their preference for hard drinking, hunting, and direct speech struck refined Athenians as rustic and uncivilized for generations. Macedon had been a peripheral player in Greek affairs, sometimes manipulated by the major powers, occasionally raided by northern tribes, and generally dismissed as a semi-barbaric backwater. The Greek orator Demosthenes famously insulted Philip II as not only not Greek nor related to the Greeks, but not even a barbarian from any place that can be named with honor. This perception began to change under King Philip II, who reigned from 359 to 336 before the Common Era, and who transformed Macedon from a vulnerable kingdom to a dominant power through a combination of military innovation, diplomatic cunning, and ruthless ambition. Philip II, the father who built the foundation, his father, Philip II, unified the Greek city-states, partly through war, partly through bribery. Then he died. Alexander took over at 20. Philip II's rise was unlikely. As a young man, he had spent 3 years as a hostage in Thebes, then a leading Greek power. This enforced stay gave him invaluable insights into Greek military tactics, political systems, and cultural values. When he returned to Macedon, he initially served as regent for his infant nephew, before claiming the throne during a succession crisis. Philip inherited a kingdom in disarray, threatened by external enemies and internal divisions. Within 2 decades, he would transform it into the Mediterranean's most formidable military power through several key innovations. The Macedonian phalanx. Philip modified the traditional Greek phalanx by equipping his infantry with the sarissa, a pike approximately 18 to 21 feet long, twice the length of Greek spears. This created a nearly impenetrable wall of spear points, extending well beyond the formation's front rank. Combined arms warfare. Unlike Greek armies that relied primarily on heavy infantry, Philip created a balanced force incorporating heavy cavalry, the companion cavalry, light infantry, archers, and siege engineers. This versatility allowed tactical flexibility unknown to traditional Greek armies. Professional army. While Greek city-states typically fielded citizen soldiers who farmed during peacetime, Philip maintained a year-round professional force, allowing constant training